This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Hello, welcome to episode 78 of Partners in Crime.
How exciting. Are you excited?
I am. We just worked out, actually, didn't we, that our live episode, well, not live episode, but live in front of a studio audience episode, will be episode 80. So it's quite a nice round number, isn't it?
Yes, we like round numbers. You like things in order. You're far more ordered than I am. I'm slightly more a fan of the chaos principle, but you're very ordered. He sits here, listeners. He's got his notepad, he's got his pen. All I have is a coffee and a few varied notes of varying degrees of helpfulness.
Somebody's got to steer this wonky ship, haven't they?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Captain Bligh. Right.
Say bird's eye, then. The beard hasn't got that long yet.
Mr. Christian! Right, onwards.
But yeah, we're going to go on a little bit more about Morecambe Vice and the episode that we'll be recording live there in front of a studio audience a little bit later on. I wanted to open up, as has become the tradition, as in it's the second time we've ever done it, of starting with an email from a listener. And Amber Rush got in touch with us to say...
I thought you said Amber Rudd for a second.
Yeah,
so she's after a job. I'm sorry, you can come on anytime you want. I'm sure if you like crime novels. We are not partisan in this respect.
No. We talked about a confession. True crime show recently on the show. She said, I personally found A Confession an intense true crime show. It touches upon the feelings of all those involved and didn't see any faults in the camera work. And I don't drink, she adds. The Vanishing Season is a very interesting read, and Joanna is a lovely person, so definitely recommend. I think that there are still a need for crime dramas in publishing, although during any creative writing piece I always end up writing about young female murders, which clarifies your point that the most commonly created crime books will write about female victims. As a result, it would be interesting to see more variety within the genre.
Okay, well, listen, I can follow that straight away.
I thought you might.
Because Craig Sisterton, our dear friend and leading writer and commenter on all things crime fiction, has written a piece about this very bravely, because of course it's a very contentious thing. What is the thing I'm talking about? Why does crime fiction include so many female victims? This is something we brought up the other week, and Amber's just commented on that and asked pretty much the same question. Well, he's written a fantastic article in Newsroom, which you can find the full thing online, so I'm going to attempt to take part of it apart to give Craig's view on these things, not only Craig's but many of the people he's talked to and written about. So, why does crime fiction include so many female victims? Craig says, frankly, because readers, male and female, and most crime readers are female, likely care far more about female victims than male ones. Talking on CBC Radio in Canada about this topic last year, British author Melanie McGrath mooted that while men are more likely to be murder victims, and statistically that is true by 70 to 80%, in real life, women face a greater psychological fear of possible violence than men. Reading crime fiction allows women to explore their greatest fears in a safe space, said McGrath. In the vast majority of crime fiction, the case is solved, equilibrium is restored, and more increasingly in modern times, by female detectives who are given agency. Now, Val McDermid told Craig at the Theakston Old Peculiar Crime Festival
to leave her alone.
She said, what we're not going to talk about, we're not going to talk about violence against women or write about it, and it will all just go away. History has shown us that if we ignore something and pretend it's not happening, it'll stop. No, that's not what history tells us. MacDermid has consistently said that as long as men commit acts of misogyny and violence against women, she'll continue to write about such issues so they don't go unnoticed. Other leading crime writers, including Sarah Paretsky, Denise Mina and Sarah Hillary, have expressed similar sentiments in a recent article. Why I Won't Stop Writing About Violence Against Women, British barrister turned crime writer Helen Field shared that she portrays the horror and wrongness of sexual violence in her novels because she seen its aftermath up close in her work as a criminal lawyer and experienced it in her personal life when younger. So, after discussing this topic with his creative writing students, Liam McIlvaney, the author of The Quaker, crime writer himself, published in a blog a few suggested rules of thumb his class came up with for treating violence against women with due sensitivity in crime fiction. Craig says he's paraphrasing here, but it's something along the lines of: avoid titillation in sexual violence and have violence offstage where appropriate. Deal with the consequences for victims and investigators. Include female characters beyond the victim. Try to suggest the victim's depth of character and something of their life beyond being a victim, allowing readers to hear their voice if possible. Show victims with agency and strength, not just sacrificial lambs for the plot. Consign virgin whore dichotomy to the lowest pit of hell. Rounding back to the original question, on balance, Craig says, I don't think crime fiction has an overall problem with violence against women, even if it depicts a disproportionate amount of it compared to real-life statistics, sometimes brutally. The harsh truth is that our world has a problem with misogyny and violence against women. Perhaps crime fiction, by reflecting the society within which it occurs, merely explores and emphasises the very real fears many women all over the world have, readers and writers included, regardless of homicide statistics. Rather than being part of the problem, perhaps crime fiction can even be part of the solution. So, bin the torture porn or tales of lurid titillation for sure, but do go and grab some of the excellent crime writing out there. Well, I think that makes an awful lot of sense to me. The overall article that Craig's written is far more detailed and far more comprehensive. That's just a part of it.
Well, you just read half of it out there, didn't you?
I did, because I think it's a fascinating and much needed article, and certainly explains a question that has come up quite a lot, and hopefully goes some way to answering Amber Rush's question. And I'm glad she liked Confession. As I say, it's a very well made and well acted piece of television. That wasn't really my criticism of it, as you know, but there we are. It's doing very well and telling the story, and probably, and I hate this phrase, ticks a lot of boxes that Craig's pointed out in that very interesting and insightful article on women victims in crime fiction, be they in literature or upon the screen.
Well, if you want to get in touch and talk about anything you've heard us talking about, or if you just want to get in touch, you can email us hello@partnersincrime.online, and if you're not too naughty, we will read it out. On last week's show, I mentioned an article I'd seen in Stylist magazine while I was doing my usual weekly read from cover to cover, which focused on the best true crime books ever written, in their experience and in their opinion. Quite agree, largely. Didn't quite get to finish it off because time was running away with us, so I'm going to finish it off now. And the next one on the list was The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher by Kate Summerscale, which I read and loved.
You did?
To do with a violent murder in 1860. And Detective Jack Witcher of Scotland Yard, who arrived on the crime scene a mere fortnight after the murder took place in order to investigate. And it's... I can't go too far into it, but it's an enormous cock-up, for want of a better word. And it wasn't the most professionally put together investigation, even for 1860, but a fascinating read. Ted Bundy, Conversations with a Killer by Stephen G. Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth, the book behind the Netflix series, which is based on 150 hours of interviews with the serial killer. Dark Places by James Elroy, who wrote LA Confidential, White Jazz, and so on and so forth. It's described as a brutal and violent book. Part of his writing stems from the murder of his mother in 1958. Haunted by her loss, Elroy descended into drink and petty crime, but before becoming a writer, 38 years later, he found it within himself to investigate her murder along with a veteran detective, and that's accounted for in that book. You All Grow Up and Leave Me by Piper Vice. about a tennis coach, Gary Walensky in 90s Manhattan, who was also a child predator with a torture chamber upstate, who was planning to kidnap one of his charges. Gone Shopping by Lorraine Gammon. In the 50s and 60s, Shirley Pitts was known around London as the Queen of Shoplifters, and when she was buried, her funeral was a who's who of British criminals, with flowers on the coffin spelling out the immortal words, Gone Shopping. Unbelievable by T. Christian Miller and Ken Armstrong, which was previously published as A False Report, but renamed to coincide with Netflix's new series adaptation. This book, Stardust Magazine says, should be read by anyone who's questioned a victim. Homicide by David Simon, who created The Wire. In this 1991 true crime epic, he spent a year with Baltimore's homicide unit writing up bizarre, violent and shocking crimes, including the Black Widow, who took out insurance on all of her 5 husbands before having them murdered. Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carreyrou. Carreyrou, maybe. The story of Elizabeth Holmes. A young and charismatic Stanford dropout who in 2014 announced she was going to revolutionise the medical industry with new tech that would make blood tests quicker and easier. Inspired by her vision, investors ploughed in cash with a $9 billion round of funding. The only catch? It didn't exist. And Gomorrah, Italy's other mafia by Robert Saviano. Yes,
I've read that and seen the series, and I'm sure many of our listeners have pretty much done the same.
12 years ago that book was published. Yes. It's been turned into a film, a TV series, and remains a definitive work on Italy's criminal underbelly. And finally, you'll be pleased to hear On Chapel Sands by Laura Cumming, inspired by the strange short-lived kidnapping of her mother, aged 3, from Chapel Sands Beach, an experience she couldn't even remember and only discovered 50 years later. Cumming unravels a tale of small-town politics, envy and regret in 1920s England.
Well, my goodness me. I mean,
plenty of books to get your teeth into there.
Well, yes, absolutely, and most of those available, I should imagine, from Kobo.
Yes, and
I would have thought I've certainly got several of them from there. Anyway, that's interesting. The one that stuck in my mind there was the Britain's most famous shoplifter. Yeah, that's quite interesting.
I think you said shopfitter.
And not the same sort of thing at all.
The story of a famous shopfitter.
I can see the headlines now. Britain's most famous shoplifter's body pinched from funeral parlour. So
how meta.
No, I need to be respectful. I don't know. I've forgotten the lady's name now. Yeah. But anyway, well, that's it. That's real life crime covered from all across the world. There, that Gomorrah book is absolutely terrifying, as is the series. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But it's brilliantly done, and both the book are extraordinary piece of journalistic writing in many ways, and adapted brilliantly to the television available on, I'm sure, Netflix. That's where I've seen it anyway. So, coming up to another one that's coming up shortly. This is Paul Hirons of Killing Times, again giving a plug for a series which is going to be shown soon, which is Netflix's Criminal, it's called, an ambitious 12-part series that sets 4 stories in 4 different countries. Oh, and it's got David Tennant in it. The streaming giant has now released the first proper trailer. This series takes place exclusively within the confines of a police interview suite. It reminds me of that concept of the one that was on made a few years ago, but it was all set in a psychoanalyst's office. You know, each episode was a different person coming in to talk to their therapist or whatever, with Gabrielle Byrne playing the psychoanalyst, which was terrific. Anyway, this is doing the same, but with the police interview suite. It's a stripped-down cat-and-mouse drama, which focuses on the intense mental conflict between detectives and suspects. There are 3 episodes per country, with each written, directed, and starring talent from each of the 4 countries. In addition to David Tennant, Hayley Atwell and Lee Ingleby, the UK cast includes Catherine Kelly, Nicholas Pinnock, Mark Stanley, Rashenda Sandel, and many others. The French cast includes Margot, I can't pronounce her second name, that's how good my French is.
Margot, we know who you mean.
And lots of other marvellous French actors whose names I cannot pronounce. The German cast also includes Eva Mechbach. I can do that one. And Sylvester Groth, Florence Kusamba. See, my German's so much more fluent than my French. While the Spanish cast includes Jose
I noticed that you missed the next one.
Which was that? Oh yes, Christine Christian
Kuchenbuch.
well known to her agent and family. Anyway, and the Spanish cast, lots of other names that mean an awful lot to you, I'm sure, if you're Spanish, and not quite so much to you if you're sitting in a studio in mid-Bedfordshire. But anyway, a fantastic idea, very intense by the sound of it, and is gathering a lot of interest from people who like to gather information and project interest in such projects. So that's Criminal. It's going to be available on Netflix. 12-part series coming very soon.
Lands today, in fact.
It lands today, in fact. Thank you very much for having your finger on the pulse.
Yes. Yes, if you like the sound of any of the books we've been talking about, this podcast is sponsored by the wonderful people at Kobo, who will give you 90% off of your first ebook purchase from them. If you head over there, find the book you want and enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout to claim that. If you're an existing Kobo customer, you can get 40% off of Crime ebooks using the promo code PARTNERS. The eligible books are linked within the show notes of this episode. While we're talking about Kobo, you mentioned last week the launch of their latest device, the Kobo Libra H2O.
H to the Cobra Libra, yes, water, of course.
Yes, which I...
It's a good thing I'm on this show. I'm so absolutely brilliantly insightful. My knowledge is sort of extraordinary, is it not?
Well, you don't need a Kobo reader to read your discounted ebooks. You can get the free app for your mobile phone or tablet. But if you did want a reader, they are excellent. And the Kobo Libra H2O has just been launched, described as the perfect balance between innovative digital technology, a comfortable reading experience, and modern design is here. Offered in black or white and with 4 colourful accessories to pair with, the Kobo Libra H2O lets you choose the model that best suits you. Read longer than ever before with its comfortable ergonomic design, the option for landscape orientation, and easy-to-use page-turn buttons. With Comfort Light Pro and full waterproofing, Kobo Libra H2O lets you enjoy your books day or night in any environment. It's fully waterproof. Apparently, can be kept in water for up to 60 minutes under 2 metres of water.
Yeah, but why would you want to do that?
Well, you wouldn't.
Oh, I see.
If you did accidentally drop it in a swimming pool and only notice an hour later...
Or if you notice 5 minutes later, you could test it by just waiting... sort of 54 minutes
just
to
leave
see
it
before
in,
you take it out, see what conditions it is.
Leave it in there another 3/4 of an hour.
Oh, I must remember that. Well, isn't it funny? For those of you who think that we have got these devices, we haven't got them. We haven't asked for them. And,
I have. I haven't got this new one. I've got the Aura H2O, which is an excellent.
So did Kobo send you that, or did you actually?
No, I purchased it.
Oh, good. You see, there aren't any favours here. We may be sponsored by Kobo in certain areas, but certainly not in that area.
No. The reason actually we went to Kobo for the sponsorship is because we loved them before.
Yes, that's true.
So we went and asked them would they be kind enough to sponsor, and thankfully they have.
Do.
So,
yes.
There we go.
Anyway, so yes, that's the new reader coming out, which looks absolutely terrific. In fact, I think I'm going to get one myself because I read books off of my phone because I've got one of those big screens. But that looks rather luxurious and quite nice. And the anti-glare would be very pleasant,
yes,
I think, on a sunny day.
They are excellent. I noticed an article in The Guardian the other week in which...
Hallowed organ.
Oh yes, the book clinic in which Christina Cruz, a 25-year-old translator from London, wrote in to ask. She said, "I'm looking for the perfect detective story or murder mystery, standalone or series that isn't Agatha Christie. My requirements," she says, "atmospheric, no technology, no misogyny. Does such a thing exist?" And screenwriter and author Alex Michaelides responded to say, "Part of the reason I reread Christie so frequently is because, in my opinion, she still has the market cornered 43 years after her death." His first suggestion was the Canadian crime writer Margaret Miller, who was a contemporary of Christie's but is now not really as remembered. She wrote more psychologically complex characters than Christie, apparently, but uses the same bag of tricks and has great surprise endings. So Margaret Miller, with an A in Miller. Also, he recommends Josephine Tay, who wrote 6 mystery novels, including, of course, The Daughter of Time, which the Crime Writers Association voted as the greatest mystery novel of all time in 1990.
Gosh.
And Ruth Rendell, who once said, "Murder is not interesting. The reason someone commits a murder is what fascinates her," which is why she focuses more on the why done it rather than the who done it in many of her works. So that was what was recommended, and I thought maybe if anybody else was looking for similar sorts of books to Christina Cruz there, that
I've got one straight off the bat here, actually.
Go for it.
A book by a writer called Kate Saunders, who many of you may know. Those who prefer something gentle should pick up The Case of the Wandering Scholar, the second book in Kate Saunders' Victorian series featuring Archdeacon's widow turned sleuth Laetitia Rodd. Begins with a missing person. It's 1851 and Jacob Welland's dying wish is to be reunited with the brother he hasn't seen for 15 years. But eccentric Joshua, who left Oxford University to live the life of a rural tramp, is proving hard to find. Laetitia heads out to the countryside in search of him, but all is not well between Rachel and Arthur Summers, the old acquaintances with whom she is staying, and she soon finds herself with more than one mystery to solve. With a well-crafted plot and an engaging protagonist and astute nods to literature and theological squabbles of the period, this is a perfect novel for a summer afternoon. So that's a very good recommendation. I think that's from The Guardian itself. Kate Saunders is an English author, actress and journalist. She has worked for newspapers and magazines in the UK, including the Sunday Times, Express Telegraph, She and Cosmopolitan. She has also been a regular contributor to radio and television with appearances on the Radio 4 programme Woman's Hour, Start the Week and Kaleidoscope. She was with Sandy Toksvig, a guest on the first episode of the long-running news quiz Have I Got News For You? Saunders has also written multiple books for children and adults. With a well-crafted and engaging protagonist and astute nods to literature and theological squabbles, as we've just said of the period, this is a perfect novel for that summer's afternoon. It was The Guardian. That is a quote from The Guardian I've just given to you again. A Dickensian glow pervades this immensely satisfying novel. Hugely enjoyable, says James Runcie, author of the Grantchester Mysteries. So there we are, a recommendation for The Case of the Wandering Scholar and the sleuthing talents of Laetitia Rodd.
Lovely. And my recommendation, if you are free next Saturday, joyful listener, is to head up to the Morecambe Vice Crime Writing Festival. It's on next Saturday 28th and Sunday 29th of September at the Midland Hotel in Morecambe in the northwest of England. Right on the seaside as well. Beautiful place.
Oh, it's beautiful. Morecambe Bay, smashing.
The main reason to go there is that we will be recording Partners in Crime in front of a live studio audience.
That's been guaranteed, apparently. Although it is a crime, murder, mystery film, the audience will be live. We've insisted on that in our rider.
They will be alive. We'll be recording that at 2:30 on Saturday, the 28th of September at the Midland Hotel in Morecambe. So if you are in the area or if you fancy a jolly jaunt, then do head up there. Tickets are available now from morecambecrimefest.co.uk or just Google Morecambe Vice Crime Writing Festival. If you want to just buy tickets to see us live, the cost there is £5. You can get a Saturday pass for £25 and a full weekend pass for £40. The full programme is available on the Morecambe Vice website, and it's a wonderful programme with lots of wonderful people who are well worth seeing, and not just us, although of course we are the stars of the festival.
Not. As I say, no. I mean, it's an extraordinary time, as we've said before, in the luxurious surroundings of the Midland Hotel on that wonderful seafront at Morecambe, overlooking the bay, looking northwards towards the heights of high country.
And you can come and buy us a beer in the bar afterwards, because we'll be hanging around there.
A beer while we wait to talk to the stars of the festival, of which there are are many. So look up on the website. It's a very comprehensive one and brilliantly put together by the guys who really do know how to put on a festival. They really are terrific, very proactive, and they've got a fantastic lineup for the entire weekend. So the advice from Partners in Crime would be: come early, stay late on both days. You won't be disappointed.
Treat yourself to a weekend away. I just wanted to very quickly squeeze in an article that I saw recently in the Irish Times, which of course I read from cover to cover every day.
Delivered through your front door.
Yes,
every morning.
It's a little bit wet by the time it gets over here. Derek Flynn, the author, says in that, I'll paraphrase, he never thought of himself as a working class writer, he says, in an article entitled Is Crime Fiction the New Working Class Novel? He says, while he knew his initial novel was going to be a crime one, he also wanted it to have its roots in the real world, something that the popular Scandinavian crime fiction genre has been doing since the 60s. Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlins books also are set among working class African-American population of Los Angeles. Scotland also has its share of socially engaged crime fiction, he says, with writers such as Ian Rankin and Denise Mina. He also adds that Dennis Lehane commented, the crime novel is where the social novel went. If you want to write about the underbelly of America, if you want to write about the second America that nobody wants to look at, you turn to the crime novel. Something we kind of touched on a few weeks back when, and I think his closing paragraph sums it up very well, and he says, this is of course a sweeping generalisation, and I don't mean for a moment to suggest that all genre fiction is working class and all literary fiction is middle class, but there is certainly a germ of truth there. Oftentimes literary fiction is classified as being a niche market because of its difficulty, inverted commas, but what if the reason it is a niche market is because it doesn't speak to the book reading public, the majority of whom are working class? What if the reason genre books are so popular is not because they are dumbed down and easy to read, but because they actually speak to the people who are buying them? So I wanted to leave you with that thought and put you on the spot with that one.
Well, yes. Well, I'm happily on the spot with that one. I mean, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, that is the new social novel. I mean, I've seen that on many occasions, and you know, I think it's absolutely true. Crime is a result of discontent in society, and whether that comes from poverty or whatever form of abuse may be at hand. Of course, you know, crime very often is the result, if not indeed the cause on a political level very often. So yes, I entirely go along with that. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Not quite as fascinating as us disappearing up to the seaside. I have my knotted handkerchief, I booked my deck chair, I have 2 pockets full of 2p bits for the slotties, and I'm looking forward to... Is Mrs. Croft joining you for this weekend?
and the little mini Croft. I'm glad you got your handkerchief sorted, because I was going to tell you to get knotted.
Oh yes, yeah, well, absolutely. Socks off, trousers rolled up, knotted handkerchief on, striped deck chair at the ready. You've never seen anyone happier. But I was brought up by the seaside, being a Westcliff-on-Sea boy.
I wanted to bring this up actually. Why is it called Westcliff-on-Sea when it's actually Southend?
Well, it is Southend, but Southend is made up of lots of different places. Like Margate is made up of. I mean, I was brought up in Leigh-on-Sea, which is right next to Chalkwell, which is right next to Westcliff, which is right next to Southend, which is right next to Thorpe Bay, which is just along from Shoeburyness. It's all pretty much the same place, but each different little area of it has its, you know, like any other town, large town or whatever. So
a bit like Hove, actually.
Hove, I've never heard of Hove actually. No, it's yes, I suppose so. You know, or New York City, all the different little parts of that. Not that one can easily compare Southend-on-Sea to Manhattan. I can't quite believe I've just done that. But
there's water.
You get the general idea.
There's water around it.
There is water. Well, that is the common denominator. Both Manhattan and Southend have got lots of water to look out upon.
And the people talk funny.
People talk funny. It's got the longest pier in Europe for people who wish to arrive in Victorian days. And
you have to pay to go on that now.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh well, I mean, I think walking is free, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think you used to pay to go on the train that used to take you to the end. So about a mile and a third. My grandfather used to have the Peter Pan's playground, which part of it still exists in Southend. It's much bigger playground now, and my children have been brought up visiting it and absolutely adore it. But there's still the old Crooked House and the old several of the Whip and various various other rides which are were sort of rides and things that are available in the 1950s, which I first went on when I was alive and well in the middle of the last century. And I got free tickets because it was my granddad's. So I've got very fond memories of Southend. I don't know whether they've got much in the way of crime writers living there. I could be wrong. If there are any crime writers from South Essex listening in on this, even if you're not necessarily within the environs of the precinct of Southend, let us know and we'll give you a shout out.
A public service announcement.
Yes, that's it. And a toffee happy on the toffee tap. Oh my goodness me, this is going to be good for a live broadcast in Morecambe, isn't it?
It is. Do you want to try again? We'll close with the words toffee apple.
Hello, welcome to Partners in Crime.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.